They call me Holloway. That ain't my real name, but it works well enough. I kill things for money. Things that most folks don't believe exist. Cryptids, legends, whatever you want to call them. I put them down. It's not glamorous, and it sure as hell ain't easy, but it pays better than breaking my back in a factory or begging for scraps in some dead-end town. I go where the work is, and lately, the work has taken me deep into the Blue Ridge Mountains. I got the call 3 days ago. The client didn't say much over the phone, just wired half the money up front and told me to meet him at a bar off the highway. Standard routine. These types don't like to give details until they see you in person. I drove through the night, passing through towns with boarded-up storefronts and rusted-out gas stations. Places where folks knew better than to ask questions. The Blue Ridge had always been a strange place, older than the country itself. I'd done work here before, but something about this job already felt different. The bar was the kind of place where the lights flickered, and the beer was watered down. I spotted my client in the back, nursing a glass of something dark. He was older, mid-50s maybe. Wore a heavy coat despite the heat. He looked up when I sat down. "You're Holloway," he said, more a statement than a question. I nodded. "There's something up in the mountains," he said, leaning in close. "Been taking people. Not just hikers. Locals too. Leaves nothing but blood in tracks that don't make sense." He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Grainy photos. A cabin torn apart like a child's toy. Scratches on the walls, deep and deliberate. And footprints. Too big for a man, too strange for a bear. "Something's been watching us," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's smart. Knows how to stay out of sight. But it's getting bolder." I closed the folder. "What's the bounty?" 20 grand. 10 now, 10 when it's done." I took the job. I'd done worse for less. That night, I drove up into the mountains with a rifle on my back and a knife strapped to my leg. The trees swallowed the road behind me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something I didn't like. Something I didn't expect. I felt watched. I parked by an abandoned ranger station, the kind no one bothers to report when it falls apart. My boots crunched against gravel as I stepped out, rifle slung over my shoulder. The air was thick with pine and decay, and the woods stretched out in every direction. A labyrinth of shadows and secrets. I'd seen things out here before, things that made men question their sanity. But this time, it felt different. Alive, almost. I made camp near a clearing, keeping my back to a rock face. Always watch your six. That's rule number 1 in this line of work. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I cleaned my rifle by the dim light of a lantern, listening. The forest was too quiet, like every living thing was holding its breath. That's when I heard it. A low rumble, barely a growl. Close. Too close. I killed the light, holding my breath, fingers tight around the grip. The sound shifted, like something massive moving through the underbrush. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I've faced down creatures that defied description, but nothing felt like this. It was patient, deliberate, stalking me. I stayed still, counting heartbeats. Minutes passed like hours. Whatever it was, it circled me, testing boundaries. The woods whispered with its movement. I thumbed the safety off, eyes scanning the dark. Shadows twisted, and for a moment I saw it. A shape, hulking and wrong, eyes reflecting pale moonlight before slipping back into the trees. Dawn broke slowly, the world washed in gray light. Whatever it was had vanished, leaving nothing but crushed leaves and the smell of damp earth. I exhaled, tension bleeding out of me like poison. That was the first round. A test. This thing knew I was here. It wanted me to know. I spent the day tracking, moving through the dense underbrush, rifle at the ready. The forest didn't welcome me. Branches snagged my clothes, roots threatened to trip me. Twice I found claw marks on the trees, deep gouges like it was marking territory. Once I found a deer carcass torn open, bones picked clean. By dusk, I reached a ridge overlooking a valley thick with fog. A cabin lay nestled at the center, half collapsed, roof sagging like tired shoulders. That's when I saw them. Footprints, impossibly large, leading straight to the front door. I knew better than to walk in blind, so I waited, crouched low among the ferns. Hours dragged on. My eyes burned, but I stayed locked on the cabin. Just before midnight, a figure stepped into the doorway. Tall, impossibly thin, movements jerky and unnatural. It turned its head slowly, almost as if sensing me across the distance. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then, with a speed that defied its size, it vanished back inside. I knew then that this wouldn't be a simple job. It never is. I don't rush into things, that's how you end up dead. Instead, I spent the next hour watching the cabin, rifle steady against my shoulder. Nothing moved. No sounds, no flicker of candlelight from inside. Just that damn fog curling around the trees, swallowing up the last remnants of moonlight. Then came the smell. Rot, thick and sweet, like something long dead left to fester in the heat. It clung to the air, to my clothes, worming its way into my lungs. I swallowed against the bile rising in my throat. Whatever was in that cabin wasn't human. Not anymore. I moved slow, sticking to the trees, keeping low. My boots barely made a sound against the damp earth. I circled the cabin, careful not to step where those massive footprints had sunk deep into the soil. Up close, the place looked worse. Wood warped and blackened with age, windows shattered, the door hanging loose on its hinges. I listened. A faint scratching, something dragging against wood. Then breathing, shallow, deliberate. Someone, no, something, was inside. I raised my rifle and stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned under my weight. The scratching stopped. I tightened my grip, nudged the door open with the barrel. The air inside was thick, almost suffocating. The stench was worse here, like the walls themselves were rotting from the inside out. Then I saw them. Skins. Dozens of them. Strung up like trophies, some fresh, others so decayed they barely held together. Human, animal, things in between. Faces frozen in expressions of terror, mouths stretched too wide, eyes hollow. A creak from the rafters. I barely had time to move before something dropped from above, slamming into the floor where I'd been standing. It was fast. Faster than anything that size should be. Long limbs, joints bending wrong, fingers too many, too long. It didn't make a sound, just snapped its head toward me, empty sockets where eyes should have been. I fired. The bullet tore through its shoulder, sending it staggering back. But it didn't go down. It twitched, head jerking like a puppet on broken strings. Then it grinned. Not a man's grin. Too wide. Too full of teeth. It lunged. I dove back, rolling onto the porch as its claws raked through the air inches from my throat. My back hit the railing hard, pain shooting up my spine. The thing slithered forward, limbs contorting, movements unnatural. It didn't rush me. It enjoyed this. I don't scare easy, but this thing was wrong. I chambered another round, breath steady. I'd put down monsters before. But as I stared into that eyeless face, I had the sinking feeling that this was something else entirely. Something I wasn't ready for. I don't miss twice. The second shot hit center mass, but the thing didn't drop. It jerked back, twisted like a marionette with cut strings, but its grin never faded. I saw the hole clear through its chest, saw the way the flesh writhed around it, like something inside was trying to close the wound. Not good. I scrambled off the porch, moving fast, rifle steady. The thing followed, slow at first, then faster, limbs snapping into place with sickening pops. It moved wrong. Fluid 1 second, jerky the next. My gut told me it was playing with me. I didn't play. I took off into the trees, weaving between trunks, breathing steady. The fog made everything a blur, shadows shifting in ways they shouldn't. I wasn't running blind, though. I had a plan. The cabin wasn't just some random hideout. It was a hunting ground. And if this thing was smart, it had traps set up. I was going to turn them against it. 100 yards in, I found what I was looking for. A pit, hidden beneath rotted branches and leaves. Old, but deep. Probably meant for catching deer or hikers who wandered too far off trail. I stopped, turned. The thing was close, weaving between trees, head twitching like it was tracking my scent. I leveled my rifle, aiming just past it. Then I fired. The bullet clipped a branch overhead. Wood splintered, crashing down behind the creature. It turned, distracted for just a second. Long enough. I ran straight at it. It didn't expect that. They never do. At the last second, I dropped low, sliding across damp earth as its claws slashed through empty air. Momentum carried it forward. Right into the pit. The sound it made when it hit the bottom wasn't human. It wasn't animal either. It was something else entirely. I didn't stick around to listen. I reloaded and started moving again. Traps slow things down, but they don't kill them. Not things like that. I needed firepower, real firepower. My truck was a mile out, stocked with enough ammo to turn that thing into mist. If I could make it there, I could end this. But then the woods went silent. I stopped, breath caught in my throat. No wind, no insects. Just dead, suffocating quiet. Then I heard it. Not from the pit. From ahead of me. A slow, wet scraping sound. Something pulling itself forward. I raised my rifle. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. Because whatever was in that pit, it wasn't alone. I moved fast. Whatever was ahead of me, I wasn't about to wait around and shake its damn hand. I kept my rifle up, eyes scanning the fog-choked trees, heart hammering steady but strong. The scraping sound didn't stop. It was slow, deliberate, like something dragging itself forward inch by inch. Then I saw it. Not the thing from the pit. Something worse. A figure stood just beyond the tree line, half hidden by the mist. Human-shaped, but wrong. Its arms hung too long, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. The skin was stretched tight, pale and sickly in the moonlight, like an old corpse that never finished rotting. And then it moved. Not walked. Moved. Like it was being pulled forward by invisible strings. The arms jerked first, then the torso, then the legs, snapping into place with each staggered step. It was slow, but purposeful, and it was blocking my way to the truck. I glanced back toward the pit. A mistake. A hand. Too thin, too many fingers. Gripped the edge of the hole. Something hauled itself up, its eyeless face turned toward me, grinning that awful, too wide grin. The pit hadn't killed it. It had just pissed it off. I was boxed in. The figure in the fog took another step forward, the thing from the pit dragging itself free behind me. My mind raced, years of experience narrowing down options. And then it spoke. Not in words. Not really. It was more like a sound in my head, something I felt instead of heard. A whisper made of static and nails on a chalkboard. Stay. My body locked up. Muscles tensed against my will. My breath caught. Every instinct screamed to move, to run, but something deep, something primal, held me still. The figure in the fog took another step. I gritted my teeth, forcing my fingers to tighten around the trigger. One shot. That's all I needed to break whatever hold this thing had on me. I fired. The bullet ripped through the thing's head. Or where its head should have been. It didn't drop. Didn't even flinch. Just kept moving. Behind me, the thing from the pit let out a low, rattling laugh. I was out of time. I did the only thing I could. I ran. I ran like hell. Branches whipped my face, underbrush clawed at my boots, but I didn't slow down. The truck was my only shot, my only way to even the odds. Behind me, I heard it. Multiple sets of footsteps now, some fast, some slow, all moving in ways that made my skin crawl. They weren't just chasing me. They were hurting me. I gritted my teeth, forced my legs to move faster. The tree line was thinning. Just ahead, past a clearing, I saw it. My truck, parked by the old ranger station, the metal reflecting the dim moonlight like a beacon. Safety. Then something slammed into my side. I hit the ground hard, the wind knocked from my lungs. Pain shot up my ribs, my rifle skidding across the dirt. I rolled, hands scrambling for my sidearm. But before I could reach it, something heavy pinned me down. The thing from the pit. It loomed over me, its two long fingers pressing into my shoulders, its eyeless face inches from mine. That damn grin was still there, stretching impossibly wide. I could feel its breath. Hot, damp, wrong. It didn't kill me. It wanted me to see. It leaned in closer, and my mind filled with static. Images. Flashes of things I didn't want to understand. A forest older than memory, bones buried beneath roots, creatures that shouldn't exist, waiting in the dark. I saw myself. My body torn open, my skin strung up in that cabin like all the others. No. I roared, forced my arm free, and jammed my knife into its throat. The thing reeled back, gurgling, black ichor spilling onto my chest. I didn't wait for it to recover. I grabbed my pistol and emptied half the magazine into its head. It fell. Not dead. Just down. I staggered to my feet, lungs burning, legs screaming. The others were still coming, closing in from the trees. No time. I sprinted for the truck, threw myself inside, and slammed the door shut. My hands fumbled with the keys. A shadow moved past the windshield. Not human. Not anymore. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. The figures in the trees stepped forward, too many arms, too many eyes. Watching. Waiting. I didn't wait. I hit the gas. The tires spun, then caught. The truck lurched forward, slamming through underbrush, tearing down the old dirt path at full speed. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was leaving the Blue Ridge Mountains. My father-in-law swears he has had an encounter with a Sasquatch in Virginia. His whole disposition changes when he speaks of it, and a look of serious fear comes over him. He is still shook up about it to this day and does not hike at night anymore. I don't know if it was an animal or a human messing with him, but he is seriously impacted by his encounter. I run at night. One night, I picked a new trail from Google Maps and headed out at dusk. Most trails in Toronto have lighting or are close enough to steal light from some nearby buildings, so I figured this trail would be the same. It was not. It was an old railway trail, and there were no lights. It ran through the city, but it was flanked on both sides by forest strips. Because I run a lot at night, I'm pretty confident running in very dark conditions, so I put in my headphones and don't think much of the dark. After I've been on the trail for about a kilometer, I notice rustling to my right in the bushes out of the corner of my eye. It's probably a squirrel or raccoon, I figure, but I keep seeing it, so I decide to take out my headphones until I get back to light. Now I can hear that whatever it is, it's keeping pace with me. The hair on my arms is now at full attention, and I'm filled with adrenaline. I pick up my speed until I'm basically in a full-on sprint, but I still keep looking to my right to see what it is. That's when a ray of street light breaks through from the other side of the forest and catches glowing green eyes. I almost stumble, and I'm trying not to panic now because falling could be very bad. But I have so much adrenaline that I can't slow down. I have my house key sticking through my middle and index finger so I can punch this thing with a pointed edge if it makes a move. Then, suddenly, I notice there's no longer anything in the bush, and I'm alone again. I finally came up on an area where the bush gave way to backyards, and I could calm down again. Probably a coyote in retrospect that wouldn't have attacked unless I fell or if it was rabid, but to this day, I've never had a bigger adrenaline rush. This actually happened the other week. My friend and I went to this hiking area around 11 at night. We expected more people to be there because it was a Saturday night, but we showed up and there wasn't a car in sight. We hiked for probably 2 hours around this place, up and down sides of rocks, only hearing the quiet sounds of nighttime. We finally decided to head back to the car, and by the time we got there, about 10 feet away from the driver's door, there was a backpack. There was no way it was there before we started, and we could not figure out where it came from. No footsteps or tire tracks indicated it had just happened, and it was perched straight up and waiting for one of us to open it. I felt like we were being watched, but I decided to nut up and open the backpack only to see clearish white tarp folded up inside of the bag. We didn't open it up much more before both deciding to get the F out of there, but we both still talk about how we should have taken it with us. Not a very climactic story, but I have dreams about it sometimes and often wonder if there was a head in there, or if it was a drop spot for drugs. I can only retell one of my friend's stories. He's a very adventurous one and was casually hiking through the Canada wilderness through the night to get to some town. He and his friend came across a creepy looking shack in the middle of the woods. When they got closer, there was a sign that said, "Keep out or die," and the ground around it was littered with bullet casings. Around the back, they found a giant pile of burned stuff. It was nearly dawn, so they could just barely see it. When they got closer, they realized it was a pile of burned bodies. They could make out some limbs in the pile. After seeing this, they booked it out of there. Only later did they find out it was just an abandoned horror movie set. I doubt I did his story justice, but I don't know if he has read it, and it's just too good of a story not to share. It was 2009-ish. I was living on the road for 2 years, hitchhiking and riding trains. I was a dumb 18, 19-year-old. I had been all over the country, West Coast multiple times, Southwest, and decided to see the East Coast. Went to Florida and went to a small festival there. It's called a rainbow gathering. They're kind of like big meetups of traveler kids, old hippies, tramps, those kinds of people. They're always in state parks or national parks. Rangers will patrol it and police sometimes show up, but for some reason it's allowed. Not sure how, but these have been going on since the 70s, I think. Some people who show up are hardcore train hopper gutter punk types, and some are super chill Christians who will wash your feet. It's a very unusual festival. There are smaller regional gatherings and a big national gathering where thousands of people show up. Kind of the poor man's Burning Man. Huge fire pits get dug out, elaborate latrines, hundreds of drum circles. Free food is constantly made from kitchens, which are just camps devoted to making food for all us bums. Well, I met some friends at a smaller regional one in Florida, and we parted ways, never thinking I was going to see them again. One was named Anna, and we sort of hit it off. I hitchhiked north all the way to upstate New York when I caught wind of the national gathering, which was going to be in Pennsylvania. I figured I might as well go. I got to this gathering early, in the Allegheny National Park, and helped set up, trying to meet people, kind of looking for my group, not sure where I was going to be camping. One day I ran into Anna, who I had met in Florida. Me and her had some spiritual conversations in Florida, talking about fairies and UFOs. She had some unusual stuff happen to her when she was a kid. So she and her buddy had just gotten to PA, and we decided the three of us were going to team up. We noticed a ton of people showing up to this thing. It was getting really crowded, so we decided to move camp to a more remote area. We chose a spot off of the main trail, which goes from the parking lot to the gathering. It's a couple miles long, and there's a lot of foot traffic going up and down, people going in and out of the festival, but we had some space. This happened around dusk. Me and Anna were sitting by our little twig fire, stone cold sober. Alcohol isn't really allowed at a gathering, it does still get in. But there's a camp at the parking lot called a camp where all the drinkers stay. There's of course other drugs at these festivals, but me and Anna and her friend just weren't into the whole drum circle scene. We had just gotten done having a deep talk about spirituality when we started to feel hungry, and stood up to start heading down to the main circle, which is where everyone can get one big meal a day. We're standing up when Anna says, "Hey, do you hear that?" And I said, "No," and just kept putting out the fire with my foot, and she was like, "No, hey, SHH, listen." So I stopped, and I could hear the sound of someone walking through the forest. The thing that was weird about it was that it was coming from a direction where there was no festival. So the festival was down below us about a half mile if we were looking down the trail, and this sound was coming from our left, where it's just hundreds of miles of Pennsylvania woods. The parking lot is way up the trail a few miles behind us. It was odd because it sounded like a person speed walking towards us. I didn't think deer because they wouldn't be coming up to a fire pit. I genuinely thought it was just some lost hippie. As this sound was getting closer, there were some people walking down the trail and some walking up the trail. There's a weird custom called Nick at Night. If you yell "Nick at Night," a dude with a tin can full of tobacco will come find you and roll you a cigarette. There's about 10 of them walking around, and their sole job is to maintain everyone's nicotine habit. They get a ton of donations from a camp. So anyways, these two groups run into a Nick at Night kid. and now are all standing together on the main trail, talking about 10 meters below us, oblivious to us. So while that's happening to our right and below us, this sound of someone walking from our left has gotten so close that we should be seeing who or what it was, and there just wasn't anything there. I was frozen, kind of stuck in a state of confusion, and I think Anna was too. No fear, just why aren't we seeing it? We could visibly see leaves and dirt being kicked up, like there was an invisible person power walking by. Whatever it was, it went right up to that group of people on the main trail and didn't stop, but it slowed down like it was checking them out. They were totally oblivious to this. They were all smoking, talking, and laughing. It kind of did a turn as it went up to them, and then suddenly did a straight line towards me and Anna. Anna had a keychain with a million things on it, and she was frantically looking for this mini flashlight she had on it. It was dusk, so not bright out, but still light enough we could see the footfalls and debris being kicked up. My mind was thinking there's a squirrel or a field mouse hopping on the forest floor or something. The forest floor was covered in dead leaves, but these steps were quick, as if this was a child or a small person walking fast. It's hard to explain with writing. This thing came right up to us. I'm standing to the right of our smoldering fire and Anna to the left. I could hear her just struggling with this keychain. It came right up to me, probably 5 or 6 feet away. There was nothing there. It did the same thing with the group. It slowed its pace like it was checking us out, like a slow trot. As it went by, Anna said, "Hey," and shone the light where it was, nothing to see, and whatever this thing was took off up the hill. Just absolutely took off. It was so fast. The footfalls became like a machine gun. If I had wanted to run after it, I couldn't have. A second later, me and Anna took off running the opposite direction, past that group, and just kept going till we were at the bottom. Funny thing happened. There's people at these gatherings who spend the whole month naked. They'll roll around in mud and just look like mud people for the whole festival. One of these people we had seen around was this 7-foot giant of a man, probably 400 pounds, naked, covered in mud and leaves. Me and Anna are in full flight mode, and at this point it's dark and we run right into this guy. Scared us so bad, Anna screamed, and we all started laughing, and that sort of canceled out the panic. We went to go find our other friend, and it was weird because Anna was very scared. She kept saying it was because of her, like she had a weird fairy, alien situation happen to her as a kid with her mom, and she felt like whatever this was because of her. I don't know, but she did not want to talk about it after, and I could never get her to elaborate. Me and this other friend, we were all about it. We went back up there. Anna said she wasn't going and wanted us to pack up the tent, and we sort of hung out, tried to look for tracks with our lights, listened, nothing happened. I've gone from thinking it was an alien like a gray to a ghost. Or maybe a fairy or a gnome. One person said it could have been a pukwudgie. These are like Native American gnome things that are tricksters and can turn invisible. They are supposed to be in that area, so I don't know. This first encounter took place in the summer of, I believe, 2016 in Ontario, Canada. Although it was a while ago, I still remember every detail like it was yesterday. If I had been alone, I would have chalked it up to something else. But the fact both of us saw this thing is what really puts me off. Please excuse the new account as well. I'm rebuilding from an older account because a ton of stuff I posted on it previously is kinda cringe looking back on. A friend and I were walking along a trail that runs alongside the main river that cuts through the city. There are some great wooded trails along the river, and some of them even lead to neighboring cities, but I digress. The sun was setting, and it was that time of evening where it was insanely dark under the tree coverage, but still fairly light beyond the leaves. I had turned on my phone flashlight to light the way, and put on some music for the two of us to listen to while we hustled home. The bugs were starting to bite, and being so close to the river, they get pretty nasty. I had paused to change the song on my phone, and my friend glances to our left into the woods. She asks me, "What's that?" And instinctively, I turn the light to where she was looking. In the darkness of the bushes and trees, we watch as this thing takes off running deeper into the brush with its back turned to us. It was making a ton of noise, twigs snapping, leaves rustling. It really didn't seem to care. Now, there are deer on this trail. I've seen a few on my walks during the day, But this was absolutely no deer. Even in such a short amount of time, the image of this thing running from us is burned in my mind. It was on all fours. It had an awkward gait like a human trying to run on its hands and feet, meaning its arms were far too short compared to its legs to be running like that. This thing was white, and the light reflected off its leathery-looking skin. It was skinny with thin arms and legs. The two of us didn't stick around much longer after that, and instead chose to run the rest of the trail, until we hit the end that lead out into a set of soccer fields. We never spoke about it after that, and if we did, it was sort of in passing. That was until yesterday. I was scrolling the subreddit for my city and paused the minute I saw a title informing people to stay away from the river trails. Curious, I checked the post out. The post described exactly what my friend and I had seen that night on those exact sets of trails by the river. I broke out into a cold sweat and immediately texted her despite not speaking for a while, as adulthood has kinda caught up to us both. She told me she still thinks about that encounter and does so at least once a week. I linked her the post and she was floored by it. I unfortunately won't be able to link to the post as it gives identifying details, but reading through the replies, it was what you would expect from Reddit. People chalking it up to the guy being mentally ill, joking about him doing drugs, and people who genuinely took him seriously were being downvoted and mocked. Someone mentioned it was all bull, and that stories of these things had been going around in the area since 1972, meaning this probably wasn't a one-off experience from the beginning. I'm always a little hesitant to share the story out of fear that I'd get the same reception. I know what I saw that night, and knowing it's possibly still in those woods along a set of trails I still walk to this day is kind of unsettling to me. I have seen shadow people and have a lot of stories, but here are two. I have a decent ones that are better, might start my own post. Story 1. Low-key but recent. I was chilling by myself when my book bag started to open by itself. I even turned around midway and the dang thing was still unzipping, but it was fast as heck. A few days prior I even seen the shadow man watching me walk down the halls after school hours because practice just ended. Story 2. I was in the laundry room when I was throwing clothes into the washer. When I turned around there was about a 7-foot pitch black figure wearing a hat. We just stared at each other until I sprinted away when the light flickered and TV turned channels. When I ran into the room, I saw the shadow figure, I call it a shadow man, a few more times, but nothing really happened. Still see some shadows out of the corner of my eye with some weird experiences. This one probably isn't, but I still think on it occasionally and question it a bit. I'm from Michigan. What more, I'm from a small town where there are still dirt roads and plenty of small and large forested areas. Because of this, I, like most Midwesterners, am extremely familiar with deer. No one wants to total a car from hitting one. So I'm driving home at night way back when, going slower than usual because it's spring, and I'm watching for deer crossing the road. And I see one dash across the road in front of me, so I brake because when there is one, there's probably two, if not more. Thing is, I caught a glimpse of this animal, and it was deer-like in every single way. Antlers, regular deer-shaped face, reflective eyes, short hair, all that. But it was running on 2 legs. And so tall. Deer are pretty big. I've been very close to them, and they are often bigger than what people realize. But this would have been an above-average sized animal. I'm well aware that deer can and do go on their hind legs, but running across the road that way would be a little abnormal. And its motions were very fluid, not off balance like you'd assume a 4-legged creature to be on only 2 legs. So it was very strange. Probably nothing abnormal or paranormal, but still something that sticks out in my mind as very odd. When I was very young and began riding my horse through the woods, back in 1973, I would at times hear these huge heavy footfalls behind me. It was autumn in Arkansas, and L.R. Pulaski County, on the outskirts of the city. Our house sat at the base of a huge hill, and the woods started about halfway up. If I continued riding, I'd end up in Camp Robinson, At the time a military ground they used for practice. Saying all that, I never saw a human or anyone practicing any military routine. But I was very used to the sound of the crackling branches, little animals scurrying about, and the echo of my horse's hoofs breaking twigs. This event happened several times and even seemed to follow me hundreds of miles when my parents moved us to northwest Arkansas in the Ozarks. I would be riding in the daytime, midday, and hear a huge footfall like the heaviest sounding footstep ever that would be almost in time with my horse's stride. So I'd stop quickly and listen, and it would stop but a moment later so that I'd hear that last footstep. I even galloped the horse several times, and it would keep pace, but when I stopped abruptly, I'd hear a couple of quick footfalls behind me. It terrified me. It's weird because my ears would prick like a dog's, and I'd hear nothing else in the forest. No birds were chirping or even turkey buzzards flying around. The worst was once we moved to Strickler, Arkansas. Our 240 acres butted up to the national forest. If I'd been riding all day and was making it home late, I'd stick to the dirt road as the light of the sun grew dimmer. I'd hear those same heavy footsteps in the woods along the road. It's unexplainable, the chills that ran up my spine. I was a seasoned outdoorsman by this time and went hiking as well, from 1978 to 1983. It never happened in the winter that I remember. I didn't see anything at the times listed, but it was more than obvious I was being stalked by something heavy enough to hear over the sound of my horse's four hooves and the leather saddle. This happened in Central Florida on January 23, 2024. To preface, my brother passed away from unaliving himself, and a month later, we had this experience. It's about 5 a.m. and we are in my car. Directly in front of us is mostly just a large lot that is well-kept grass and one shed. In the middle of the lot, my sister notices this girl with strawberry blonde hair. We can only see the back of her, but we notice that her feet aren't touching the ground. We were so confused. I was also looking for a light source because it was as if she was standing underneath a street light. She had what I would call a glow. She was no more than 50 yards away. I put my high beams on. She didn't flinch. Of course, my brain is doing mental gymnastics. What or who is this? That's when we saw it. It is what I refer to this shadow being because it tried to appear as a person, but it wasn't. Its back was kind of hunched. It took long strides and short strides that didn't make sense. It tried to hide behind a pole, peeking its head every so often out. This shadow being was all black. I've never seen anything like it before. No distinguishable features, only black. It was bipedal. If I could go back in time, I would have recorded it. But honestly, my brain just couldn't comprehend what we were seeing. I was in awe. If anyone has any insight, or if I should cross-post, I would really appreciate it. Adding more info due to the questions. Honestly, we watched all of this for 3 to 5 minutes. We were parked in our car, getting ready to leave for work. We said a prayer, and my sister watched as I backed out. The girl never moved. As far as we know, the shadow being didn't follow us. We were extremely scared and chose to get the heck out of there. I would like to thank the people who kindly provided me with some great information. I had something happen off K-10 in Kansas in 2012. I saw a giant UAP, which basically cemented to me that no one knows what's going on, and UAPs and humanoids are real. Anyways, my friend, who is ex-military and was honorably discharged, and has been in combat, sent me an insane text yesterday morning. I'm going to post it verbatim. Bro, I'm not sure what the F I just saw, but it's not something I've ever seen before anywhere. Not in real life, TV, games, or anything. I was walking my pet dog named Redacted for anonymity, and we were down by the tree line behind the trailer park between K-10 and the trailer park on 31st and Iowa at 4:30 a.m. My pet dog just stopped dead in his tracks and started barking at the sky. I looked up, and there was something floating about 50 feet above us. The closest thing I can relate it to is something shaped like a human with massive wings and glowing eyes. I pulled my phone out, and it shot straight up and disappeared. My heart is pounding right now. He sent me the text right after it happened. The closest description he gave was that of the classical Mothman trope. Tropes like Mothman are just sensationalized ways of categorizing people's real unexplained experiences, in my opinion. But they're useful because they help categorize people's experiences. My friend knows I'm open-minded, hence why he reached out to me first. Edit. I'm a dumbass and mixed up I-70, which is north of Lawrence, and K-10, which is actually the highway south of Lawrence, near where this happened. I just need to decompress on this. Looking back, I don't believe I was necessarily in immediate danger, but I feel a lot of that had to do with being in the right company at the right time. I-29 female run barbells, and this past weekend we had a rodeo. Normally the rodeo scene is rowdy, but it's mostly working class folk that are unwinding. There's always a lot of beer and a lot of competition. It's normally a safe enough environment, but I've always been one to keep my guard up. As I was leaving, a guy had struck up conversation with me. Gave me the whole, "I saw you riding, you did really good" routine. I thanked him. We talked for a little while, but I was neglecting the group of people that I was there with, so I told him politely that I needed to go, but maybe I'd see him again. Should have chosen my words a bit more carefully. Around 1 in the morning, I was sitting outside of my camper having a smoke and a glass of wine before going to sleep. It's not uncommon for people to still be roaming around at this time. I saw the silhouette of a man walking towards me. The same guy from earlier approaches me with 2 open beer bottles and has a seat in a chair near me. He asked if he could take me up on my offer. A bunch of things started going through my head. What offer? The maybe I'll see you again. And I'm definitely not taking an open beer from someone that appeared out of nowhere. And how did you find my camper? I told him that I was about to turn in and that he needed to leave. This was extremely inappropriate and invasive of my personal space. He just smiled and kept drinking from his beer bottle. "Let's have some fun," he said. What the F? Like, what is your criminal malfunction? That one sentence, as simple as it is, gives me goosebumps. What part about no and leave don't people understand? I told him one more time, no, and that he needed to get away from my camper. He stood up and made more advances. I attempted to get into my camper, which is where I pack heat, but he made a move for the door. She said, "No, my guy," I heard from behind me. I turned around and saw that my older and younger brother were standing there with a group of their friends. Apparently they went and closed down a strip club, which they considerately didn't invite me to. I don't know if they moved in stealth mode, or I was just paying more attention to the creep in front of me, but they really showed up at the right time. My older brother is 6'3" and has the build of a medium-sized refrigerator. My younger brother is an Army veteran and stands at 6 feet. The man simply apologized and began making his way out of my space. My older brother told him not to come back. I gave them both the biggest hug. I was really lucky to have them show up when they did. I was lucky enough to have gotten the guy in a picture while I was taking a photo with a friend. We talked to the head of security about it in the morning, and they said that they would deal with it. Not sure how that will be handled, but I'm glad something is being done. I know I was in theoretical danger, but that's just my thought process, because the active danger was prevented. I know I should be more cautious sometimes, and I'm working on it. One thing is for sure though, no matter what happens with whoever, I'm not going to stop existing because of it. I had a weird encounter with reptilian in November 1988. My ex-wife and I were near Base Lake, Indiana at night and saw some type of craft with many colored lights land nearby. We moved towards it where it was close enough to get a decent look. It was shaped like a triangle with a pointed end at the bottom. It hovered just above the ground, flashing and glowing different colors. Not long later, a door opened on the side and a ramp came out. We started to get out of there when we noticed a weird-looking thing coming down the ramp. It was shaped like a man but looked like a lizard with huge feet. It stopped moving and looked over in our direction. We got out of there. I returned to the spot 2 days later and didn't notice anything. I did experience very bad headaches and body aches for a few days though. What do you think we encountered? Not a park ranger, but I alerted the park rangers after I was going to use one of those little restroom huts you use prior to a hike after seeing a bloody scene in there. Basically, I went to grab the handle to the restroom and the door abruptly swung open and a younger girl swiftly limped out, dragging one leg as she hurried away. I immediately looked inside the bathroom and it was covered in blood, feces, and urine. I mean covered. Blood was smeared everywhere and even dripping from the ceiling. Feces mixed with blood was flung about, and the stench was unreal. The blood loss must have resulted from significant injury, as it was pooled all on the floor. I stumbled backwards and tried not to vomit. I alerted the ranger, and they said they would try to locate the girl. From what I could tell, she had no blood on her that I could see, but why was she in there? There's no way she didn't notice that before entering, as the smell alone knocked you back. I still wonder if she caused that scene. Was she giving birth and disposing of the baby in there? The restroom had one of those toilets where it's like a big tunnel that goes way down, kinda like a huge porta potty. I wonder if she had the idea to give birth in there and dispose of the baby afterwards, because it was a very remote area, or was she injured somehow? But she started to see another person and ran away. It still haunts me. My dad worked in forestry and has many stories, but one of them stands out. He received a call about a fire, or was just supposed to go check something out. Upon arrival, he saw a car on fire. He was trying to check if there was a person, not this time. A guy started shooting at him, and with a car on fire in the neck of the woods, he started running. The guy he was working with asked him why he was running, and he told him to go see for yourself. When the guy returned running, they decided to leave it be. Other times, he stumbled upon moonshine operations and instances of insurance fraud involving the burning of cars. Yes, I believe I encountered a Bigfoot in northern Michigan, just west of Higgins Lake, in an oil field that has lots of trails that are nice to ride on with a TVS. This was last year. I had taken my three-wheeler old ATV before quads up there, and was riding in the southernmost part of the field, which is a heavily wooded swamp. The trail was about 2 cars wide, and there was a partial clearing that went for about 20 feet on the right side of the trail. As I rounded the curve that led to the straight area where the clearing is, I noticed something standing in the middle of the trail, near a tree that happened to be right at the edge of the clearing on the edge of the trail. It was about 7.5 or 8 feet tall and brown, standing on 2 legs. It was about 150 feet from me, and as soon as I saw it, I braked, and it left the trail and went into the very dense woods at the edge of the trail. I was with another person riding, and they had seen it as well. We left quickly because while my machine could probably outrun it, the mini bike the person I was with was on probably wouldn't, only goes about 22 miles per hour. The ground was hard in the trail from vehicles, so no tracks, and the grass at the edge of the trail was very tall, and I didn't want to stick around too long to look for any out there. So I guess I have no proof, but it definitely was not a bear, as it wasn't structured right to be a bear, and it walked off on 2 legs as well. While it scared me, I loved the area and wouldn't stop going there for something as simple as that. I would like to see it again if I could. I want to share some experiences I had a few years ago. I've posted this story on another website while the occurrences were happening to try and understand the situation a little better, but I think you guys will enjoy it. I've also shared this on another sub. I just want to mention a few key points before I share some of the things that happened. I am not looking for fame nor attention, and everything contained within is 100% factual. I am Australian. These occurrences happened on the central coast of NSW. I am an avid outdoorsman with a keen interest and in-depth knowledge of Australian native fauna. Each of these occurrences has a witness apart from myself. I don't claim these events are paranormal, yet I am, to this day, still without a reasonable explanation. Occurrence 1. I live on the NSW's Central Coast in an area that has houses in close proximity to Brisbane Water National Park, literally within meters from some back fences. My partner and I hold a keen interest which sees us venture into bushland regularly. For argument's sake, let's say we are avid bird watchers. A few weeks ago, the local fire service commenced back burning in parts of the Brisbane Water National Park over 2 or so days, which was obviously for hazard reduction. Most of the fire was directed at burning off leaf litter and dry debris, which covers the ground in an effort to reduce the chances of spot fires, which have in the past become large fires and threatened houses, causing neighboring suburbs to be evacuated. Because of the way the back burning was controlled, it completely burned off the debris, and basically 90% of flora that was over 2 or so feet seemed to have survived, except some charring, of course. Even some grass plants survived, while others were completely burned, including their underground roots, which left large round circles in the substrate. This meant the canopy was fully intact. This is an important point in my story. The fire was controlled so well that the left-hand side was completely obliterated by fire, while the right-hand side was untouched. The path is about 3-4 feet wide at its widest points. Anyway, about 48 hours after the fire service had finished back burning, my partner and I ventured into a large patch of Brisbane Water National Park along a track we have walked no less than 200 times in the last 10 years. The first thing we noticed, of course, was the lack of small shrubs and ground cover, which had been replaced by a 3-4 centimeters layer of ash. It was also hard not to notice the smell and non-visible smokiness, which irritated our throats and noses, but by far the most profound thing we noticed was just how quiet it was. Usually, we hear birds chirping, snakes slithering into the underbrush, lizards scampering out of the way, and ducks splashing around in the creek that runs along the whole length of the walking track on the right. Across the creek, there are literally kilometers of bush in all directions, so it was a little odd that it was so desolate even after back burning. We decided to press on, even though we were pretty sure that we weren't going to see any wildlife. We continued along the track for about another 20 minutes, all the while chatting about nothing in particular, when all of a sudden, we both jerked our heads to the left to see 2 vertical vines, which stand at about 6 feet tall and 4 centimeters or so in circumference, come towards us like they have been shaken, held back, and released towards us kind of like a slingshot. We immediately ran over to the trees 4 meters or so off the track, because we thought it may have been caused by wildlife. My first instinct was to look up as it may have been a large bird fleeing, but there were no birds at all in any of the trees, and we would have seen and heard the wing flapping and it breaking through the canopy. It wasn't any type of gona, as we only have 2 types which occur naturally here, and both are arboreal and will take to the nearest tree when threatened. We checked every tree, every hollow log, and any type of ground cover which survived the fire and found nothing. It definitely wasn't any type of marsupial, because it would have been spotted when we checked the trees and surrounding ground cover. It also wasn't any type of snake, as the only arboreal snake we have locally, which weighs in kilos, is the diamond python, which I could spot from a mile away. We continued walking for another 3 kilometers or so along the track, and the whole time felt like we were being watched, and I was quite uneasy, but that feeling completely left as soon as we turned around and backtracked and headed towards home. Occurrence 2 and 3, I believe this is the first time I have shared these. My partner and I went out on another adventure, but this time we were looking for nocturnal animals to photograph. We went to a waterfall, which was only about 15 minutes from our house, but is rather secluded and completely dead at night and on weekdays. Funnily enough, it becomes packed on the weekends during the day in the warmer months. The layout of the waterfall is basically a large parking lot at the stop of the waterfall, which has a small park with BBQs tables and a small block of toilets. From the parking lot, you can also access the very top of the waterfall, which is basically a rock escarpment with water running through it. You can also access stairs that take you down to both the middle of the waterfall, which is just a huge rock platform, and the very bottom of the waterfall. It takes about 20 minutes to walk from top to bottom. Anyway, we parked the car, and I grabbed my gear, which included my camera. We started making our way towards the top of the falls, which has a 2-foot barrier you have to step over to access the rock escarpment. Right as I went to put my leg over the fence, I heard the most disturbing noise I've ever heard. It sounded like a human moaning in pain, but to describe it the best I can imagine having 10 different people with 10 different voice qualities, all making the same moaning sound at the same time. I'm not one to frighten easily, but I have to admit it sent chills up my spine. I told my partner to hurry up and get back to the car, and I locked the doors as soon as we got in and left in a hurry. Now, this place is pitch dark. There are zero lights, and there is no way in hell you'd be there without a torch. Not to mention you'd be able to tell if anyone was there by the cars parked in the parking lot, as this isn't a place you'd walk to. When I told a close friend of mine who also frequents the waterfall to photograph wildlife, he told me he also had an experience the night before the night after I was there. He had finished work late and thought he'd go for a quick walk around to see what he could find. This was in the Australian spring when everything is out and about due to the warm and humid weather. He said he had parked his car and got about halfway down the stairs to the bottom of the falls when he came across a snake. He was photographing it when he heard the door of the toilet block being slammed repeatedly. He started running up the steps to get back to his car and said as he was running up, it sounded like something was going mental, slamming things within the toilet block. He got in his car and left. My friend and I decided to go check out the waterfall that night to see if we could find anything. We parked the car and went straight to the toilet block. We checked the block that he heard the commotion in and found a reasonable amount of blood inside the basin and a small pool in the basin's soap dish. We contemplated calling the police but weren't sure exactly what we would say. We left soon after, and neither of us visited that place for over a month afterwards. Since then, we have been back to this place multiple times without incident. Occurrence for the last occurrence taken from the forum I first posted on. Now on to last night. We headed out along a road on the Central Coast, which by day is rather busy due to the high number of residences and farms that are along this road. By night, it is usually very quiet, with a few cars using it sporadically, so I have my high beams on 95% of the time. We drove along this road for about 40 minutes in search of marsupials to photograph. This road intersects large masses of bush on both sides. I would also like to add at this point that this road is not straight or level by any means. There are a mixture of turns as well as slight to aggressive inclines and declines along basically the entirety of this road. After driving for 40 minutes without any luck, we decided to head back along the same route we took. We were driving for about 10-15 minutes on our way back when we hit one of the very slight gradual inclines along the road. When we were about halfway up the incline, I noticed something in the distance, maybe 200-250 meters or so, which I initially thought was a shadow being cast from residual lighting of my high beams, when all of a sudden, it moved from the middle of the road to the right side. At this point, and while the figure was still in motion, I asked the passenger and the person who has been present for the 3 unexplained experiences, "Can you see that?" To which they replied, "Yes, what is that?" We got to the top of the incline and onto level ground once again and stopped in the location we sought. I stopped, and I pulled out one of my torches and surveyed where we had seen it. To my surprise, where it had crossed to was a small property, which was essentially a house with a very small paddock with horses out the front. But what caught my attention was the horses were not startled in the slightest, and could actually see one of them close to the fence eating. My family has a cabin. It's really just an old mobile home in the middle of the woods in northern Michigan. We've had it for years and years, but only recently some unexplained odd things had happened, and the police have even been out to search the place. The last time I went to the cabin was the worst experience. I went up with my friend. For context purposes, we're 2 girls in our late 20s and arrived at dark. We got out and unloaded, but had trouble turning on the power. It has an outside electrical box because the lock was frozen shut. We were trying to get it unstuck, but kept hearing noises around the cabin. Finally, it sounded like the noises were very close to us, and as we weren't getting anywhere with the lock, we rushed inside in case it was a bear milling around. We sat inside for maybe 5 minutes before deciding to drive out to the nearest town to get a motel for the night. We would come back once it was light to get the power on. We grabbed a few things and headed back out to the car. I got in and turned the car on, but nothing happened. The car was 100% unresponsive. The doors wouldn't even lock. My car had absolutely no issues. We had just driven 3 hours to the cabin without any problems. Something had to have happened to the car in the few minutes we were inside. I told my friend we needed to get back inside. We got to the door and locked up behind us. We looked at each other, suddenly scared. Our car was totally dead. We had absolutely zero cell service, and we had no power. We tried to stay calm. We made a new game plan. We were just going to rough it for the night, and then, at first light, walk in the direction of civilization until we got cell signal or ran in to help. Only a short time later, we were sitting together in the living room quietly talking. Suddenly, that was two sharp, loud knocks on the back door of the cabin. We both absolutely froze. We sat there, horrified and shaking, just waiting for someone to push their way into the door or window. This was a mobile home, so it would take very minimal effort to break in. We were met with only silence, but now knew someone was outside. What did they want? It was much scarier to think they hadn't broken in. They just potentially sabotaged our car and were now knocking on our door to toy with us. We sat, silent and terrified. After a while, we started talking again, only to have something bang on a window. Just one loud smack. I've never been so scared. We quickly realized we just had to stay alert and awake until morning. We just had to hope that whoever was outside didn't try to get in. It didn't, but pattern of the knocks on the window continued for hours. As soon as the sun was up, we ventured outside. We found no tracks. This happened many years ago, so I will do my best to recall all the details. I used to live in a rented apartment with a roommate that was near some train tracks, and on top of the usual train crazies, we had a halfway house about a block down that had some real winners living there. And when I say close to the tracks, I mean they were literally in the backyard. The train lights shined in my bedroom window, and the whole place shook when a train went by. We had our share of encounters with weirdos, but nothing that really stood out as dangerous, just weird. That was until this night, sometime between 10-11 p.m. There was a knock at the door. I answered it as my roommate was already in bed. There was a squirrely-looking middle-aged dude in a hoodie with his hands in the front pouch pockets. I could tell there was something in there other than his hands, but couldn't tell what. He asked me if he could have a beer, to which I declined and started to shut the door. He stuck his foot in the door and said, "Wait, never mind, I have a beer in my pocket here, I just need a place to drink it. Can I come in and drink my beer?" To which I gave him a firm no. He started acting even stranger than he was before, so I turned over my shoulder and yelled to my roommate to lock and load, because I knew he had a shotgun in his closet. We both did. We were hunters and lived in the Midwest. My roommate, who is about 6 tall and pretty strongly built, came around the corner in nothing but his whitey tighties and sporting a shotgun. I can still see the look on that man's face. His eyes nearly bulged out of his head, and he about fell over his own feet, clawing for traction to get off our deck and disappear down the tracks. I still think about that guy from time to time and wonder what he had in his hoodie. I'm fairly certain it was some sort of weapon, but I have no idea what his intentions were once he gained access. Luckily, a dude in his underwear made him think again about trying whatever it was he had planned on. My grandfather had this second house out in Wilmington, Ohio. Super country area, especially for me since we were from Cincinnati. It had a large pond with lots of fish in it, so we would go out there to have family cookouts and to fish. Me and my brother would often go exploring in the woods, as children tend to do, making up adventures, using sticks as swords or guns. We had been up in this area many times over the years, but one particular year we went into the woods and noticed something super strange. There was this weird camp set up in the woods with all these strange symbols painted on the trees, and on the table set up out there, like real demonic looking shit. The oddest thing was that there was a school bus hoisted up in the damn trees, like 30 feet off the ground, set between two big ass trees. HBW they ever got a bus up there is beyond me. Anyways, there was a tent out there with the symbols painted on it, and me and my big brother played with the idea of going inside it to see what was in it. But nope, the F out of there. To this day, I have never seen anything like it. Grandpa ended up selling the place, so we haven't been back since. Extra stories. Also in the woods was a shanty town of sorts. Like houses made of sheet metal set up right in the middle of the woods. Clothes hanging out to dry and everything. Thought that was pretty strange. And being black, my grandfather had a secret room behind a movable wall set up in a bathroom in the house. Just in case the clan ever comes for me. Lol, we got a kick out of that. Live in California near the Sierra Mountain Range. My neighborhood isn't small, but it's right in the heart of a pine forest. My house is on the edge of town, and there is a field across from it that takes you out into the wilderness. In this field is clusters of granite stones covered with roots of various scrubby bushes and random Douglas firs. Last night I was sitting in my home office next to my open window, which is on the second floor of my house. My computer desk is against a wall, and when you face it there is a window off to your left. Outside the window you have a good view of the field across the street. Now the night itself wasn't really all that spectacular, but there were a series of events that took place that left me feeling uneasy. The most notable thing was a lack of background sound. There were no owls, there were no crickets, and there were no frogs singing, and no wind. You could sit there and hear your heart beat if you were quiet enough. This silence didn't really bother me that much, but it made a sharp contrast to the sound of several sticks breaking off in the distance. It sounded like it came from the field, but that in itself wasn't extraordinary. There are all sorts of animals that walk through there at night, so I looked over with a casual glance, didn't notice anything, then went back to my computer. A few moments had gone by when I noticed in my peripheral vision a silhouette dart quickly across the field. Again I glanced over, a little more dubious than before, but again it didn't feel like anything out of the ordinary. Maybe 20 minutes later I looked outside again and noticed a night jogger running down the street. I yawned and decided to turn in early. It was 10:30 p.m. and I needed to be up at 5 a.m. The only other thing that stands out about the night was waking up around 2 a.m. to hear the wood on my porch creaking a bit. The next morning I went about my day and at one point found out that a jogger had gone missing last night. I started to piece together the dissociated and seemingly benign events of last night and got a sickening feeling in my stomach.
A couple of friends and I were born in December when I decided we should take a walk through the woods behind my house. I didn't think much of it as my friends and I had done it many times before. There were 4 of us and we set out at about 11 o'clock at night. It was rather dark, but there was some light from the moon. The weather was quite cold since we did this in the winter. The area we walked on consisted of game trails, which moose typically used, as well as trails for mushers, runners, and cross-country skiers. We had walked about 2 miles from my house to another entrance, where most people usually enter. On the way, we talked about unexplainable events and things like Bigfoot or UFOs. When we reached the bridge where most people entered, one friend smoked a cigarette. It was then that we saw a light and decided to move on. On the way back, we heard a wild dog barking frantically and decided to pick up the pace. It eventually turned into a sprint. While we walked, we continued talking about it, and it was then that I realized something had been following us, testing us, or even harassing us. This had started much earlier, but I hadn't thought much about it. I initially thought it was my friend Warren, who is sometimes clumsy, making noises like slipping, but it turned out to be something throwing things at us. I realized this about halfway back. I asked if Warren kept slipping, and he told me he wasn't, thinking I might be playing a prank on him. We stopped for a minute to listen, and I told the others that something strange was happening. We shone a flashlight around, hearing noises like footsteps and branches moving and breaking. The leader thought I might be playing a joke, but when I assured him I wasn't, he decided to walk behind me. That's when something threw snowballs at us, nearly hitting us on several occasions. It was then that he realized this was no joke, and we picked up a light jog for most of the way. When we were almost out of the woods, we heard dogs again. maybe 20 feet away, branches breaking, and something throwing stuff at us. By the time we left, it was about 3 to 3:30 in the morning. I didn't go directly to my house because I didn't know if it was still following us. I knew it was not a prank because the snow in the woods was more than 5 feet deep, making it extremely challenging for someone to play a prank like that. I was spearfishing at night with a pretty powerful flashlight when out of the dark came this foot-long snake-looking thing. Almost gave me a heart attack. Turned out to be a ragworm swimming towards my face. A couple of minutes later, another one came swimming at me. 10 minutes later, the water was full of these long suckers all around me in the dark. Creeped me out. Turned out it was mating season, which makes them leave their holes in the sand, swimming up to release their sperm by destroying their bodies, dying in the process. Torchlight must have been drawing them out, as if it was the full moon or something. I'll be checking for ragworm mating season every time I'm planning to go spearfishing. Edit. People have been asking why I spearfish at night. Species are the same, trout, flatfish, etc., but they're closer to the shore and more relaxed at night. In some countries, too many people take advantage of the fact that it's a bit easier to take the fish in the dark. This has led to spearfishers getting bad reputation. In many countries, spearfishing at night is illegal. So will it be in all of EU this year? Because some spearfishers without moral are taking too many fish in southern Europe. It's sad to see the sport being ruined by people just wanting money, not caring for nature. I only take the fish I can eat for myself and my family if I find any at all. So should anybody else. It's important to take care of the nature. Be responsible. Sash Lake, visiting from Wiltshire, reported that at 12:20 p.m. I was leaving Drumnadrochit on a coach, admiring the view while the coach was driving past the loch. It started to rain and a light fog rolled in. My view and vision was partly limited due to the trees alongside the loch. But something caught my eye for approximately 5 seconds and made me jump out of my skin. I saw a huge black mass and hump in the middle of the loch, roughly the size of a double-decker bus. I would say it was around 75-100 yards away from me. I was confused and in disbelief. I jumped to my feet to get a better look. Trees completely blocked my view for about 5-8 seconds. There was a clearing in the trees, and when I looked back to where I saw the black mass and hump, there was nothing there. I don't usually hike, but my friend, whom we'll call Desmond, hikes 24/7, especially at night. I remember one day he invited me for late night camping. Basically, we hiked in the woods, and he wanted to go up a mountain. Even today, I ask why the heck I agreed to this. I've been in nature a lot to understand that something was awfully wrong with that forest. No animal sounds and no sounds of bugs, absolutely nothing. Not even mosquitoes, to let you understand. For a good 40 minutes, it was peaceful until we got to the other side of the mountain. I remember Desmond telling me, "Hey, do you see houses down there?" Now, thankfully, I've got good eyes and saw what seemed to be 7 abandoned houses circling each other. Desmond said to me, "Want to go check it out?" Of course, being cautious as ever, I said no. But he started calling me a scaredy cat for not saying yes. Finally, I gave in, and we went to check it out. Moments later, when we approached the houses, somehow it was very quiet, too quiet, to be honest. I told Desmond to get out of there because this place was too suspicious, and he told me that there was no way a human could live here. But that's when we heard footsteps from the woods, heavy yet slow footsteps. We went to hide behind some bushes, and what we saw was a woman with a lantern walking around and sobbing as if she had lost someone. I saw, though, that she was holding a knife in her left hand and was chanting something. I kind of heard her saying 2 things, "Curse them and their children." While I was extremely frightened, Desmond seemed even more scared than me, which surprised me since he is braver than all my friends. We sneaked our way out of there, but when we got back across the mountain to go to our car, we saw the same woman behind us, only without the lantern, and she started chasing us with her knife and what seemed like a hatchet in her other hand. We ran like there was no tomorrow, and her screams filled us with more fear, making us run even faster. Once we reached the car, we left the woods. By now, the sun was rising, and we finally got to town. What I'll never forget, though, is that we had stopped at a store to get some drinks, and I said that I'd wait outside for a bit. I saw a poster on a street lamp. It was the face of that woman on it, and the poster said, "Missing." I need some outside perspective to make sense of this because I am at a loss. I can't quite remember how old I was, maybe 5-ish. I have this super vivid memory and I can't quite make sense of it. My mom just brought it up tonight, and it was crazy hearing it from her perspective. One night when I was around 5, we had some family friends come over with their kids. We had an underground room beneath the house that was like a basement or spare bedroom area. All of us kids loved playing in the downstairs room. That night, we built a fort with some mattresses and blankets. The family friends went home later that night, and I remember my mom tucking me into bed. We had a whole good night routine for all of my teddies, so they didn't feel left out. I fell asleep in my bed. I woke up later in the night because I felt cold. I was in the blanket fort in the downstairs room. I bolted awake. I was so scared of the dark and was so confused as to how I got there. The downstairs room had a bit of an eerie vibe on a good day, and this night it was so dark and cold. I felt like I was being watched and closed in on, like the same panic you get when you run up the stairs quickly at night. I bolted out of the downstairs room, up to the ground level, where the backyard was, and then up the back stairs to the back door. I was sobbing, screaming, and pounding at the back door. I woke my whole house up, my parents and sister. My parents rushed to the door to unlock it. They double-checked the door and windows, and everything was closed and locked. Everything locks from the inside. My mom brought it up tonight, and we've talked about it before a bit in the past. But I asked her what she remembered. She put my sister and me into bed. She said she woke up to me banging on the back door and screaming. My parents got me inside and tucked me in again after a lot of comfort and snuggles. My mom said she was sure she tucked me into bed and that she has no idea how or why I got outside when the whole house was locked. Also, I would never do that as a 5-year-old. The house we were living in at the time had a bit of spiritual presence, real weird, unexplainable things that have happened, but nothing scary or malicious, just making themselves known or residual hauntings. It's only happened once or so each time, but we had unexplainable and very clear footsteps, knocking, full-body apparitions, and other weird things happen. I did sleepwalk a bit as a child, maybe an explanation. But also, how did I get out of the house when all the doors and windows were locked and could only be locked from the inside? There is no way I had the cognitive ability to lock up after myself or have a house key and the windows locked from the inside at 5 years old. For my own sanity, I have been trying to make sense of this because the alternative is a real kick in the pants. I'm thinking more of a paranormal experience, which is and also awe. So my question for you is, what the heck happened? How could I have gotten out of the house and ended up in the mattress fort we had built in the downstairs room? Do you have other theories or questions as to what happened to me? Please help. I remember walking out of my mother's room 2 years ago. I saw at the end of the hallway, out of the corner of my eye, a black figure walking straight into my room. Terrified me. I could go on and on about these stories and similar ones, so comment specifically if you want me to respond with more. A couple days later, my then boyfriend came over. Very Christian, didn't believe in ghosts, told me all the time. Would make jokes and try to scare me cause it humored him. I walked him out to his car as he was leaving that night. He seemed freaked out and went home kind of quickly. He FaceTimed me once he got home and said, "I didn't want to freak you out, but I saw a black figure in your window staring at us while we were outside." My mom sensed a horrible energy when I got home too. I never told him about the black figure I saw cause I assumed he would make fun of me or try to scare and get a ride out of me. In May, my best friend's wife offered to fly me out as a surprise for our birthdays, which are 2 days apart. They just had a baby, and she thought it would be a fun relief. They live on the second floor of a huge brownstone in one of the oldest parts of the city, right near the Allegheny Cemetery. I've worked in many haunted kitchens and have seen things, but never actually had contact. I'm also very sensitive to the veil and very intuitive, so I think I tend to attract wandering energies. I also have night terrors, which have gotten a lot less frequent since I went to a psychic, and usually my partner is there to wake me up if I am trying to scream. So the first night I was there, I was sleeping on a pad in the living room with the door open. My friends in their bedroom with the baby and the door closed. I was lying on my back and started having a nightmare, but it was different. It felt like there was something at the end of my feet waving its hands in my face, like the jester thing from a Jack-in-the-Box playing the "I'm not touching you" game like a child. Like usual, I struggled to wake myself up and tried to say something like, "Please leave me alone." But I just ended up yelling incoherently and bolting up. I was embarrassed that I screamed out loud in the middle of the night in a house with a newborn and thought I'd have to apologize in the morning. And also, of course, ask about ghosts. I drifted back to sleep, but again felt another presence and woke up to see a figure standing above me in a plaid black and white shirt. Thinking it was my friend who I must have woken up, I pulled myself up on my elbows. I called out his name, which, coincidentally, is actually Casper. Sorry if I woke you up. The figure's energy seemed kind of mischievous. I thought I felt a smile, if that makes sense. The figure bent down, picked up a small plush toy, and threw it at my face. It hit me, without a doubt. Hit me in the face. I yelled, "What the actual F?" and grabbed my phone, still thinking it might have been Casper trying to wake me up so I'd stop screaming. Turned on a light. No Casper, and nothing near my head that resembled a small plush toy. I said a few prayers and went back to sleep. The next morning, I asked his wife Bailey if I woke them up and if the house was haunted. She didn't even look up. "Who did you see?" I described the events and the figure in a white and black plaid shirt. She said, "Oh, that's Ariel. She lived here before us and died here in the dining room. She really liked wine. That's why we sleep with the door closed. Just close it tonight, and she'll probably leave you alone." She said that there was another one, a girl in a white nightgown that they only very occasionally see near a locked door that leads to an old attic. She also said that their downstairs neighbor had a distinctly bad spirit that lurked near the door outside. When Casper got home later, Bailey just said, "Guess who I met last night?" And he just laughed and said, "Oh, you met Ariel. She's a little scamp." He told a story about being alone and watching a glass of Cabernet Ariel's favorite slide across the counter from across the kitchen. He said it was like a movie and couldn't really believe it until he had to run over and grab the glass before it was knocked off the counter. I closed the door for the rest of the week and didn't have any other encounters. Like I said, I have many stories about other experiences, but this was the first time I had actual physical contact. I am half Mexican, and in recent years my mother and I have started participating in the Dia de Muertos tradition by creating our ofrenda and hanging photos of relatives who have passed. This morning my mom asked me what time I came home the night before, and I said it was 11:40 p.m. She mentioned that our security camera reported someone at the door or someone unlocking the door at 3:33 a.m. and showed me the report on the security app. A few minutes later, the report disappeared, as if it had never popped up. My mom is quite spiritual and believes it could be an ancestor visiting our house. I, personally, am skeptical but open to spirituality, so I wanted some input. So me and my family bought our house back in 2000. We were the first to live there and moved in after the house was built. The only explanations we have is that the clothing these ghosts wear are like early 19, late 1800, and you'll know why. The first ghost made herself known when I was 12, 14. I always had trouble sleeping at night and couldn't walk around my house at night, as I felt like someone was always watching. But I always just thought that was irrational kid thinking. Or so I thought. One night I was laying on my bed, not to sleep, but on top of my comforter and all. I was just staring out my bedroom door into the hallway. The hallway light and bedroom light was on, and being in the second floor, I think I also had on the main entrance light on. Think of a chandelier, where the entrance you can see the stairs right away, and see a bit upstairs as well. I had no music or anything playing when I hear a little girl's laugh, just as all the lights turn off and my door closes shut. I freaked out and started screaming when my mom came out of her room on the first floor, thinking I was playing with the lights. She didn't believe my explanation that night, but I'll come back to this. The second ghost made himself known in a more creepier way. One night when I was 15-16, I woke up at exactly 3:14. I felt something tap my shoulder, and as I turned to see what it was, a man stood next to my bed. He appeared to be in his late 40s, early 50s, judging from his white hair and white mustache, or beard, in what I could only describe as Civil War uniform for the Confederacy. Only thing was his skin was very pale, and his eyes had no pupils. I wanted to scream, but he only moved his finger over his lips to signify be quiet, or SHH. I laid in my bed frozen with fear as he walked out of my room and closing the door quietly. From that night, I kept hearing him match in my upstairs hallway. Now being I was the only one that could account these spirits, I always was told I was crazy. Until my brother and mom both told me they noticed the girl. She never did anything harmful, except she loves to play with us by hiding things somewhere we know we didn't leave them, as well as returning them to where they were originally after we look everywhere. Main things are keys, remotes, and small objects like nail polish or makeup. It's gotten to the point where if we lose something, and we know it's not where we left it, we just say, "Little girl, we need this back," or "Little girl, we are in a rush and can't play." She'll normally put it back in its place a bit quicker. The older man was seen by my grandfather and my mom as well. My grandfather just saw him walk in the front door and directly to my parents' room. My mom would see him at night, but all he does is tip his hat to her and walks away. One night where she was crying a lot, I believe it was over losing her grandparents or her brother. He sat next to her and put his hand on her shoulder. She said he felt very cold, but she felt safe. Not sure if this means anything, but I thought it would be cool to share this with you all. I grew up in the Kettle Moraine State Forest in southern Wisconsin. I would constantly ride a TVS and dirt bikes on the south end of Whitewater Lake, a place called Nature Island Park. This is a section of the Kettle Moraine that has 122 acres of trails and wilderness for people to enjoy. It borders the south end of Whitewater Lake. The trails are fairly well used during the summer, but not ever packed with people. When I was younger, some friends and I would run around Nature Island Park doing what dumbass kids do. Just for the record, I lived about 18 minutes from Bray Road, the supposed home of the Beast of Bray Road. Anyway, some friends and I were running around the trails of Nature Island Park back in the day, probably about 8 of us or so. We heard something breaking branches off the trail, not too far from us. We all stopped to listen. There are no bears, no cats, nothing too scary around here. Maybe the occasional coyote, white-tail raccoon, etc. But whatever this was had to be large, so we all got a bit concerned. This thing must have moved because we heard a large snap of a branch. We took off running like a bunch of lunatics. We could hear this thing running behind us. It was literally like something out of a movie. My friend trips and falls as we're trying to catch up with the rest of our friends who had left us in the dust. As I stopped to help the other kid, we both looked back down the trail to see the silhouette of something enormous standing in the trail and staring at us. I couldn't make out any details. It was just a massive black mass of something that looked like it wanted to dismember us. I yelled, "What the F is that?" Just about the same time, this thing dropped down on all fours and bolted off through the timber like a freight train. We got the F out of there as quick as we could. We could hear the thing busting through the woods, getting farther and farther off from us. As we got to the parking lot, everyone around us heard the commotion. We got on our bikes and rode like crazy all the way back home. It's not too much of an encounter, but it was enough for me to never go back to Natureland Park at night ever again. This all happened about 35 years ago, and I've only told a handful of people. I actually feel a bit better getting this out. Not too much happens around the small town. In 1995, on a quiet mid-morning in Sudak, Crimea, I, a local resident named Georgie, decided to take a stroll to the Black Sea embankment to enjoy the refreshing sea breeze. With a goblet of beer in hand, I made my way down to the sandy shore, gazing at the tranquil horizon. The day was calm and remarkably beautiful. All of a sudden, an unexpected and eerie incident unfolded. Something sneaked up from behind and placed a rubber mask on my head. Startled, I instinctively reached for the mask under my chin and pulled it off, thinking it was just a bizarre prank. But in the blink of an eye, I found myself in an immense hall, completely disoriented. There was no sign of the sea, the beach, or the sky. Instead, the walls were lined with colossal screens and an array of mysterious control panels adorned with buttons. In front of these panels, there were oddly shaped chairs. When I looked down, I realized I was holding a rubber mask that resembled a blue reptilian monster, with skin resembling that of a lizard covered in warts. Suddenly, a door in the wall slid open, and 3 monsters entered the room. These creatures bore a striking resemblance to the face on the mask I had been holding. They were tall, standing at about 2 meters, with bluish skin and an abundance of warts covering their entire bodies. They were completely unclothed and had an awful appearance. One of them approached me, placing his hand on my shoulder. This alien had 3 enormous, curved, claw-like fingers on his hand, and he spoke in a low, hoarse voice, revealing his large yellow fangs as he said, "Homo sapiens." Terrified and overwhelmed by panic, I began to scream, recoiled, dropped the mask to the floor, and fled from the room. I entered a corridor filled with numerous oval doors, strange screens, and unrecognizable instruments. Driven by fear, I burst into another room, where I encountered another blue reptilian humanoid. This being stretched his colossal arms outward and asked, "Where are you running to?" He then touched something on the wall, revealing what I can only describe as an abyss, an endless expanse of space, with stars and breathtaking cosmic vistas. Trembling with fear, I watched as one of the blue reptilians approached me, took my hand, and comforted me with the words, "Do not be afraid." He guided me to the next room. In that room, I witnessed a sight that defied all reason. Hundreds of reptilian humanoids standing in precise formation, shoulder to shoulder, all fixing their gaze upon me. Suddenly, they parted ranks, revealing a stunning, completely nude woman with light hair, peacefully asleep on a small sofa. I observed her for a few moments before the blue reptilians closed their ranks once more, obscuring her from view. The alien who had been my guide then led me to a screen displaying stars. With his clawed finger, he pointed at one particular star and declared, "Earth." Afterward, he embraced me with his powerful 3-fingered hands and uttered a cryptic statement, "Stay with us, we have no time and death." Terrified beyond words, I could only manage to express my desire to return home, emphasizing that my mother was anxiously awaiting my return. I pleaded with them to allow me to leave. The alien responded, "Is there anything you wish to know?" At that moment, I could think of only one question. "How long will my mother live?" The alien replied, "As long as your current age." Following this exchange, the star on the screen rapidly approached, eventually resembling the Earth's globe, complete with its swirling clouds. Suddenly, I found myself standing near my house, but facing in the opposite direction from where I had originally left. Astonishingly, I had been gone for 5 hours. I noticed a peculiar detail. The coins in my pocket emitted a faint yellowish glow when I took them out, a phenomenon that disappeared by morning. Alright, first off, this isn't my story. I found a phone out in the woods near my house. They have been bulldozing and taking down trees to build new houses, and I like to walk around and see what they've done. I do not know the woman that posted this or what her Reddit handle was, but I know that she wanted it up here because she believed we were the only people that would believe her. Her phone was pretty banged up and has absolutely no service. I figured this was the least I could do for her. From here on, these are the words of a Mrs. Helena White. October 9th, 2013. My name is Helena White. I am 36-year-old female from Kentucky, which is where I currently am. I need someone to see this, though by the time you do, I will already be dead. I don't have internet access here, just my cell phone that's dying and has 100% no service. I have scheduled this to upload to Reddit, where people actually believe the weird things we all have to say to each other if anyone ever finds it. Everyone there has an open mind and can at least know the truth. I have also scheduled one to go to the police station, but they will never find me. The best they can do is give my family the news. I feel terrible for my mother, that she will never know what happened, never have a body to bury, never have closure. No one I know will, but at least they will know that I am gone. It's better this way, believe me. If they knew the truth, they would never sleep again, and no doubt they would hunt for me. Again though, they will never find me. I will be dead, just not gone. I know you all on Reddit have heard some seriously crazy shit. I mean, I read about the girl that found that weird creature or house thing in the woods right here in Kentucky a couple of months ago. And I've seen people talk about everything from zombies and ghouls to ghosts and vampires. If there is anywhere that will listen and know my story is true, it is here with you guys. I should explain. My husband Jeff and I headed out into the wilderness. I probably shouldn't say exactly where, because I really don't want this to happen to someone else. It's better to let it stay here with Jeff and me. But it is a very beautiful and remote patch of forest that extends for many miles. It is a very large place and does see visitors ever so often, but the seclusion of it is one thing Jeff and I both love. We had been planning this trip for months and was seriously excited that it was finally time to go. We had everything you can imagine for camping for a full 2 weeks out here in the beautiful wilderness. Rain-proof tent, dishes, cookware, food, water. We were ready for roasting marshmallows and hot dogs over the open fire, hiking and admiring the beauty all around us. Yes, I am aware that this makes me seem like a hippie, and maybe I am a little bit, but I really love the outdoors, especially the woods. Anyway, Jeff and I had planned this right down to every last detail, and were ready for the perfect, tranquil, and rejuvenating camping trip. That isn't what we got though. 2 days and we got caught in a huge thunderstorm and had to hunker down inside our tent while the wind and rain beat so loudly against the sides and top of our little rain-proof tent that we thought we might be blown away. Just as quickly as it came, it was over and the sun started shining again. If you've ever lived in or visited Kentucky for any amount of time, you know what I mean when I say that this was seriously just typical Kentucky weather. It's kind of our thing, I guess. 1 minute blaring storm, next sunshine and birds singing. After that nice little downpour, every bit of our gathered firewood was soaked, and they weren't drying up anytime soon. Jeff went to find more wood, and I decided to stay behind and clean out the fire pit, so it would actually burn the wood Jeff brought back. It was starting to get dark, and if we didn't have a fire, we would be cold and unprotected. I had gotten it suitably ready when Jeff came flying out of the ever-darkening woods. He did not have any firewood. I was a little upset by this since it was already nearly completely dark. Jeff, what the is all I was able to get out before Jeff was at me, throwing one arm around me and one over my mouth. I was terrified at this point. What was this? Why was he doing this to me? But I could hear him mumbling, "OF, OF. Please pardon my language, but he was mumbling that over and over in my ear. I knew what that meant too. It was bad and about to get worse. I heard my husband's voice in my ear again. Helly, his nickname for me. When I say run, I want you to run as fast as you can back to the car and get the hell out of here, okay? I was terrified at this point. What the hell had he seen? And was it coming for him? I moved his hand off my mouth and stated, "I'm not just going to run off and leave you, Jeff, and you know that. I have seen my husband scared only once in the 15 years I've known him. It was right after his father had a heart attack, and they didn't think he was going to make it. Jeff and his brother Dean paced the floor back and forth. Once I went to stop Jeff to try to comfort him, but when I caught his eye, my heart broke. I grabbed him and held on as tightly as I could until his silent sobbing finally subsided. The look I saw when I caught his eye this time was so much worse than the last one. He was terrified of losing his father, but this was like he had reached a new level of fear. Before I could ask him anything else, we heard this god-awful roar. I mean, this thing could have shaken houses. It was the most terrifying and unexplainable sound I have ever heard. Jeff grabbed me, kissed my forehead, and told me to run. I didn't obey. I probably should have, considering how things turned out, but it's done. Not 2 seconds later, this monstrosity of a creature comes barreling into our camp and within view. I am a little embarrassed to say that I screamed like a little girl. I think most people would have. This thing is so hard to describe, but I am going to try my best. This thing was at least 9 feet tall, maybe taller. Either way, he was big. What really threw me off, though, wasn't how high he stood over me. It was how skinny he was. I can't describe to you how skinny he was. It was like he had never eaten in his life. Like skin simply draped over bones. His bones rippled through his gangly leathered skin. It looked like giant worms wriggling as he moved. His arms were almost as long as he was tall. They could stretch much farther than a typical man could, and he sort of looked like he just rose from the hell of the earth. He had a large head that looked like that of a deer, only a psychotic evil deer from Satan. His nose elongated and dripped with white, foamy drool. Just like a deer, he had long, knotty horns that branched from the tip of his skull. That leathery-looking skin was grayed and patchy with what appeared to have been hair at one time, with his hands and feet sprouting out what looked like weeds, like a big pile of hay had been stuffed up his sleeves. If he had had any, I might have been more relieved. The creature stood, watching for a moment, taking us in as we did him. I was terrified. I had never seen anything like that before. The scariest thing I have ever encountered in the woods was a wolf, but luckily it was alone and didn't appear to be hungry, so he just turned and jaunted off. This thing was quite the opposite. He looked hungry and determined. I started to scream uncontrollably. Apparently it didn't like that. He let out a roar at us, blowing that foul-smelling drool all over us. That sounded like everything you can think of dying and screaming in their death all at once. He then extended one of his giant arms and smacked me with it, and grabbing Jeff before I could even get back up. I heard a rumbling sound as he pulled my husband closer to him. I realized with horror that rumbling was of hunger. Jeff was gone in an instant. The creature snapped his head off like a doll and swallowed in one quick gulp. He began just biting into Jeff's body like he was some kind of sandwich or something. The crunching was the worst, trust me. It is a horrid sound no one ever needs to hear. I threw up, screamed, and then remembered that Jeff had told me to run. I was too late though, because just as I was pulling myself, painfully I might add, out of the brush pile I had landed in, the monster was done with Jeff. Just like that, the man I knew for 15 years, the man I called my husband for 14 years, was just gone. But then he came back. The monster taunted me by becoming reflective as he moved. A facade of Jeff took his place. I could see my husband like he had become him, but I could see through it too to the monster behind the disguise as well. Perhaps it was because I saw the monster before he changed. I don't know, whatever the case may be. That thing can take the form of people it has killed and eaten, or at least, that's my best guess. I finally freed myself from the brush and took off, full speed ahead toward the direction of the car, my husband's melodic voice filling my mind, my ears, my very core beckoning me back. He was so convincing that I almost turned back. I fell into a huge hole. I think it was a trap. I just don't know if it was a trap from people for that monster, or a trap built by the monster to catch people. Either way, I fell at least 20 feet and my leg is broken in 3 places. I can't even move it. I'm going nowhere. I'm sitting here writing this now because I can still hear my husband's voice calling for me, and sometimes the monster's roar. He is looking for me, but he thankfully went the wrong way. I know what's going to happen though. He'll be back shortly and he will kill me. and then he will steal my face. So please, if you ever find this, anyone, get out of these woods now. And don't come looking for me, I am dead. We both are, and some horrible monster is wearing our faces so he can eat you too. Mom, I love you so much. Don't come looking for me. Goodbye. Helena White. Me again. I can tell you this, I'm not going back out into those woods. Quick update. Apparently you should not Google the name of the woman above, Helena White, as she appears to be a porn star. When I Google my name, I get sent to a boob page. It kinda sucks. Anyway, for those of you wondering, let me try to explain it a little better. I live about a mile from where they have been logging. They are building a new road, one that is supposed to make it easier on us all to get around. Basically, they are bypassing our town. But the important part is that before they started the logging, I spent a lot of time back into those woods. I liked the solitude and atmosphere, at least I did. I don't know how I got lucky enough to find that phone, but it was in a huge pile of dirt, barely sticking out of the side. They are ripping the place apart back there. I suppose it does have to be level for a roof though, right? I brought the phone home, of course it was dead. I was able to charge it with an older universal charger my dad has. It was a fairly nice phone, and I thought I might be able to clean it up and give it to my little brother if I could get it working. I did. I went through it and I came across this message in a notepad app. I have absolutely no idea who this woman is, nor did I know that there is a porn star with the same name. Lol, sorry about that. As for the monster she keeps talking about, I don't have a single clue. I have never seen or heard about anything like that around here. Our campfire stories and old legends are pretty much the Goat Man and Bigfoot, so your guess is as good as mine. I thought of a Wendigo and a Skinwalker, but there have never been any stories of anything like that around here that I know of. The cold was the first thing I noticed, a biting, relentless cold that seemed to seep into your bones and never let go. My name is Josh, and I was leading a Navy SEAL team on a mission that, in hindsight, was doomed from the start. We were sent to investigate a distress signal from a research station in Antarctica that had gone dark weeks ago. As an ex-CIA agent, I was no stranger to high-stakes operations, but nothing could have prepared me for what we found or didn't find at that station. The place was a ghost town, abandoned equipment scattered around, and an eerie silence that pressed down on you. But it was the artifact that changed everything. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen, ancient yet otherworldly, and from the moment we laid eyes on it, a whisper filled the air. It wasn't just noise. It was as if the artifact was speaking directly into our minds, sowing seeds of doubt and fear. The effects were almost immediate. Paranoia crept in, turning team members against each other, seeing threats where there were none. We tried to stay focused, to secure the artifact and figure out what happened to the researchers, but it was like the station itself was against us. Violent hallucinations haunted us, scenes of terror that felt all too real, blurring the lines between what was happening and what was imagined. Then the entity appeared. It was a master of our fears, a shapeshifter that could become anything it wanted. One moment it was a fallen comrade, the next a grotesque monster. It hunted us, using our own minds as weapons against us. We fought back, but how do you fight something that knows your deepest fears? One by one my team fell, victims of the entity or the madness the artifact induced. I can't say for sure. I was alone, isolated in the freezing wasteland, with the whispers growing louder. In a moment of clarity, or perhaps desperation, I fled, leaving behind the artifact and the horrors it unleashed. I called for backup, hoping against hope that they could contain whatever we had unleashed. But when they arrived, they found nothing. No research station, no sign of my team, just endless ice and snow. They didn't believe me, said it was all in my head, a result of paranoia and isolation. The artifact, the entity, my fallen team, according to them, none of it was real. Now I'm here, locked away in a lunatic hospital, a place where they tell me I'm paranoid, that I've lost touch with reality. But I know what I saw, what I experienced. The cold still lingers, a constant reminder of the truth they refuse to believe. The whispers haunt me, even in the silence of my room. a chilling echo of the horror that lies hidden beneath the ice. They say I'm mad, but I know the truth. The horror is real, and it's still out there, waiting beneath the endless expanse of Antarctica. So I'm a 25 years old female, and this strange thing happened to me just this afternoon. I often take nice and relaxing strolls through the forest on Sundays together with my dad, which is some kind of tradition since my childhood, and today was no exception. Sometimes my uncle joins us on those strolls, and today he did so too. We walked down one of our usual paths, and at a split of the path we met some old man. My dad and uncle obviously knew the man was walking the opposite direction back towards the village. They did some small talk, and then we headed further along the path through the forest. My dad and uncle being a bit ahead of me and talking to each other while I took some photos of the beautiful nature around us, in the process walking a bit slower than them and stopping a few times. There were a few times I was a good distance behind them, which at that point I didn't realize that it could have been dangerous. At some point on the path we turned to head back home, and as we walked a bit I stopped for a moment to take a picture of the trees next to the path. Then after taking the picture I, for some reason, looked a bit left and was absolutely shocked the moment I turned my head, because farther in the forest, leaned against one of the trees, stood that old man we'd met before, absolutely still, just staring intensely back at me without any movement and without saying a word. After the initial shock, I decided to just look away and keep on walking, not daring to look behind us most of the way back. I didn't tell my father or uncle about it, but it was just such a weird experience. What scares me the most about it is that I don't have any real explanation as to why that man had been following us, and even more why he was doing so not on the path, but just within the forest. And if he didn't have anything creepy in mind, why he didn't say anything, but just stare. I'm just so glad that I wasn't walking alone. This happened almost 15 years ago when I was 7. My best friend's mom would babysit my brother and I before and after school. My mom would usually drop us off at her house around 6 a.m. She would make us breakfast, and the three of us would walk to our elementary that was less than 10 minutes away. For preface, we would walk through an adjacent neighborhood, through this small wooded area that had an enclosed bridge, and that led us to the back of our elementary. The elementary sits back in a long tree line that runs about half a mile north and another mile south. Anyways, we're about to get to the turn where we walk into the tree line to the bridge, and this guy comes cruising down the street. At first, I don't even think we noticed him considering how young we were, but right when he's about 10 feet away from us, he slows down to virtually 0 miles per hour. There was nothing that stood out about his appearance either. He was middle-aged, white male, very generic. Well, we all stare at the car and start walking super slowly. If we stop, he would stop. If we walk, he would slowly go. During this whole ordeal, he has a blank expression on his face. Not anger, no smirk, just this sinister deadness almost. This went on for probably 5 minutes because we were too scared he'd jump out of the car if we turned our backs on him, and I was mainly scared for my little brother. Finally, he speeds off, and we run the rest of the way to school. Immediately go to the principal's office, and at this point we are bawling. We gave them our version of the story, his description, and whatever else a 7-year-old is actually capable of giving. They take action by calling the cops and our parents. The cops come, and we explain where it happened and the story again. Then our parents ended up taking us out of school. From then on, we weren't allowed to walk to school anymore, and our babysitter would take us. The reason this ended up being so creepy is because apparently there had been reports around that time of a guy who would sit under the bridge we walked over right by the school and watch people. They didn't know if he was homeless or if it was this other guy who we encountered. They never caught the guy, and we never saw him again. Whether this was a more sinister encounter than we thought, or he was just bored, we will never know. I do know how bizarre it was though. Who stares at children that intently while driving by? He even turned his head around as he was driving. By his chance of luck, no other cars drove by during this whole situation. But weirdo driver, let's not ever meet again. I went to college in the prairie country of Minnesota. There wasn't a whole lot of public ground, but there were a few pretty large swamps that kept people out. Scouting the edge of the corn in October, I found an absolutely torn-up corner of the field next to one of these swamps. Great rubs everywhere, and a trail straight through the marsh leading back to a strip of trees on the only high ground around. I came back with my waders and a few climbing sticks the next week, and after about a half-mile walk through knee to chest-deep swamp, made it out and up into a medium-sized oak for an evening sit. Saw a monster buck, but that's another story. Shooting time came and went, and just as I'm lowering my bow down, I hear the most blood-chilling sound I've heard in the woods. I can only describe it as a mountain lion crossed with someone being murdered, along with growling, hissing, and crashing. It first started about 50 yards off, and of course, as darkness fell, the sound inched closer and closer to my tree. At this point, I'm losing it trying to convince myself the odds of a cougar this far south are pretty slim. But that didn't help thinking about what the alternatives might be. Well, it finally reached my tree, and I was able to light it up with my phone flash. Last week, I decided to go camping at a nearby national park. I'm an experienced camper, and I had camped this particular spot dozens of times. I parked in the designated parking spot for campers and grabbed my gear. I headed off into the wilderness. I normally like to get away from people. I can cover 20 miles in a day, but I don't normally do that every time. I had been walking for about 5 hours, so I was a 5-hour hike from my car. I knew I was far from the normal tourists and family gatherings. That was my intention. It was close to sundown and was starting to get dark. Walking along the trail in the forest, it gets pitch black really quickly. I had not seen another person for a few hours. I had a pretty good idea that I was alone, and the chances of coming across another camper were small, as late as it was and as far off as I was. I was walking to where I was going to set up my tent for the night, and I could only see about 10 feet in front of me. And it was getting darker by the minute. Eventually, it would be pitch black. There are no lights out there off the grid. Normally, the only light is from your fire or flashlight or cell phone. As I was walking, I heard what sounded like footsteps coming just beyond my available light, off in the trees about 40 yards away. I stopped to listen and try to figure out what it was. I stood there scanning the distance, but the noise had stopped. I then spotted what looked like a dark figure standing behind or next to a tree. I couldn't tell which. Whatever it was just standing there. I couldn't make out the shape very well, so I thought it was a deer. I stood there quiet, looking at it. I have to admit, being alone and so far from any help, I was a little spooked. I've heard stories of murderers who attack unsuspecting campers or hikers in some national parks because of how vast the area is and how vulnerable the people are, being far away from civilians. I stood there for a few minutes, scared that it was going to start coming towards me. I was not sure what it was. I didn't know if it was a wild animal. Those can attack humans too. I decided to turn around, keeping my eyes on the mysterious dark figure. I was scared that it was going to follow me. I knew I couldn't walk all night 5 hours back to my car in the dark. I was tired, and I didn't want to make any light. My plan was to stay quiet and lay on the ground until dawn. I would sleep if everything was kosher. I walked about a football field away until I could not see it and unrolled my sleeping bag. I laid there looking in that direction and listening. About 45 minutes went by and I heard the footsteps in the distance. My heart began racing because I could not see anything at this point. I didn't know if it was an animal. Whatever it was would take a few steps and stop, take a few steps and stop, over and over. I couldn't see, but from the direction of the noise, whatever it was walked to my side, about 15 yards away, then crossed in front of me, then stopped. It was very close. My heart was beating so fast. I was sure it could hear me breathe. It kept going as it crossed in front of me and walked further away. Whatever it was had come very close to me. I laid there too scared to move. I couldn't hear anything. For all I knew, it was standing still right by me. I heard no noises, no human sounds or animal. only the sound of leaves and sticks being walked on. From the time that it crossed in front of me and headed off away from me, and the time I couldn't hear anything, I managed to get my nerves enough to get up and keep walking back to my car. I did not hear or see anything since hearing it come close to me as it crossed my path and head off in the other direction. I made it to my car and there were other cars. The sun was close to coming up and I fell asleep in my car. I could hear people talking and kids laughing as I slept, so I knew it was okay. I know not any blood and guts, but still very creepy. I still don't know what it was. Could have been an animal. I'm just glad that it didn't find me. I remember the time when I was in second grade, returning to school for my lunch hour. As I walked near a clump of trees in a field, I encountered a strange little figure about my own height, standing at just under 4 feet. The figure had an unusual greenish tone to its skin and was barefoot. Next to it was a round thing from which I assumed the entity had emerged, although I didn't witness this happening. The entity started jabbering at me in a language I couldn't understand. It then took out an object from a belt around its waist, resembling some kind of gun, and squirted a putty-like substance into the palm of its hand. I noticed that the entity had long fingernails that looked like claws. It handed the putty to me, and I was confused by the whole encounter, so I started to move away. When I turned back to look again, both the man and the object had vanished mysteriously. Later on, I confided the bizarre story to one of my teachers. They questioned me about the putty, which I showed them. The putty was yellowish with green flecks, about 1/8 inch thick, and roughly the size of a golf ball. It had a quite hard texture. As I was about to leave, the teacher noticed the object on the ground nearby. It seemed to have definitely shrunk in size. I put it back in my pocket, and that was the last anyone saw of it. I live in the northern end region of Germany's Black Forest, and even though the region is nothing in comparison to US rural areas or even rural German areas, it still has its quiet and dark roads. So I am at a school event that went on until late night. You could call it a prom kind of thing, and I take the last bus to my village at 1:36 a.m. in the town where my school is. The bus ride takes 30 minutes, and we're a good 20 minutes into the ride. Aside from me, the driver and one guy who was almost asleep, the bus is empty, as the road we're driving on. It's the forest stretch right before my village, and it's pitch black, nothing to see. The bus comes around a corner, and in the middle of the road is a vehicle gray Audi A3, with hazards on and both front doors open. The bus driver brakes hardly and comes to a stop right behind the car. Nobody to see, nothing to hear, just the engines running. The bus driver turns around in his seat and opens his mouth to speak when suddenly this woman comes out of the woods, running towards the bus doors. Bus driver, sleepy or now awake guy, and I just watch as she starts to hammer against the bus doors, screaming like some kind of animal. Bus driver slams into reverse and then drives away, almost slamming the driver door of the car. We speed trough the forest, and at the first stop in civilization, he phones the police and some of his colleagues to inform them. I still don't know what the hell was going on there, but I've heard from friends that they've seen similar things, gray Audi with hazards on, in various parts of the county they and I live in. Still creeps me out, and I normally try to take the bus earlier than midnight or sleep over when I'm away.
Thanks for listening. Hope you already fallen asleep. See you tomorrow at the same time.